First off, welcome in, Chris. Really appreciate
Thanks.
you joining us tonight. Tyler's been talking you up and going over and sharing your guys' escapades on the same lifting team. So it's really cool to hear. But real quick for our audience to kind of get an understanding of who you are and what your expertise is, kind of just talk about your background with the strength and conditioning side, both on your training and obviously your education within it as well.
Yeah, so I guess it goes back to when I was at Penn State. I was an undergraduate, and I took a class with Dr. Zadiorsky, who's a famous scientist in the field. And I didn't know up until that point that there was a whole section of the field where you could work with athletes. And as soon as I found out, I'm like, all right, I'm all in, going this way. And then went forward with it. And then I found my weightlifting coach, Leo Totten, and it's part of East Coast Gold. So I'm learning how to do the lifts alongside Tyler, and we're getting coached up, and we're all, progressing forward as you do in the beginning. And as I kept going with my education, I realized that at some point, to do what I wanted to do, I was going to have to get a PhD. So started to looking into what schools I could go to. And at the time, the only school available that was an Olympic training site was East Tennessee State University. So I went there, I coached weightlifting full time, and then I completed my doctorate there in sport physiology and performance. And I focused on athlete testing and monitoring and strength and power development in weightlifters was my main focus. And from there, I graduated and took my job at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut. I've been here ever since, and now I serve as the graduate program director for exercise and sports science. And we prepare strength and conditioning coaches and sports scientists to go out into the field and train and develop athletes with the best methods possible.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so Chris is being really nice and professional. And the reason I love Chris is, yes, he is a nerd. I am too. But Chris backs it up with he has spent an enormous amount of time clanging and banging with some weights. So he talked about ETSU for a little bit, that his time there. Bro, you were a professional weightlifter. Let's not quit it. Like you're going to school, but you were lifting weights every day.
Yep. Yep. Five,
Yeah.
6 days a week, every week. Yep.
Yeah.
For
He was
for
essentially part of an
10 years.
experiment.
Yep. Yeah. Whole
Yeah.
Part of
time
him.
kept training.
Nice. That's
Yeah. Can
awesome.
you explain your coach there at ETSU?
Like what the program was, or like who I
Yes.
was working with.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So Dr. Stone is one of the originators of sports science in the United States. So he's probably considered the godfather of sports science in the United States, bringing periodization to with a Western approach to the United States. He really got block periodization going for the American system, and he developed a training plan for East Tennessee State. And his big thing is on strength development. So he believes heavily in strength being the driver of other qualities, and his programming and tactics were based around becoming as strong as possible. And so, when people say like how strong is strong enough, I mean we're talking like multiple sets of 10 at double your body weight in the back squat is like you're getting there. Like he wants strong people. They produce a lot of strong weightlifters, and that was the system I came up under. Is really strength first, leading to power later on, and then there's technical development brought alongside that.
Which is funny because when I was at Oregon, it was almost the exact opposite. Was that you gradually increase speed, always speed, 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 and we will get stronger in the process. So it was bullets over bowling balls was our methodology. So that's why I love Chris. We'll bounce ideas back and forth off each other,
Yep.
because they contrast each other, but ultimately you can still get to the same, end line, same
Mhm.
goal. Okay, Chris. So wanted to talk about hypertrophy training today. Can you just give a brief definition of hypertrophy? It's a word that gets bounced around a lot, especially in these channels, and just to give a summary of what it is and how you can get it.
Yeah, so for a basic definition of muscle hypertrophy, that's going to be growth of the contractile proteins within the muscle. So that's your actin and myosin. And when enough of them grow, the diameter of your existing muscle fibers will grow larger. And so hypertrophy is the growing of that tissue over time and the acquisition of those new proteins into your body.
And in your professional experience, does it take more time to repair from that style or hypertrophy training than it does from strength training?
I wouldn't say that it takes more time to recover, but the recovery is going to be different due to the mechanisms that drive hypertrophy versus the mechanisms that drive strength. So, from what we currently know, volume is the main driver of hypertrophy. So, you have to develop sufficient volume in order to create the mechanical tension as the signal for muscle growth. So, that is going to be a different stimulus for recovery than something that is like strength training, typically done heavy, 6 or less reps. That's going to have more of a neural component to it compared to more of maybe a peripheral component that's following with hypertrophy. So the recovery in terms of timelines, it's similar. It could be longer if you're doing a large volume for a given muscle group, but there are different outcomes depending on how you're deciding to train.
Excellent. And can you talk about the importance of just having some size on you or creating hypertrophy in someone who's on team? Because when I went into the 2-3, that active squadron in Florida, a lot of the main focus was getting these guys more size to build the chassis, so to speak.
Yeah, so this recently has been controversial in the literature, but some people out there believe that muscle size is not related to strength. But what we directly know is that the diameter of your muscle fibers is related to the potential for force production. So all things considered, a bigger muscle is going to be a stronger muscle. And so if you can make the key muscles involved in performance bigger, later on down the line, when your technique or your execution, your movement, whatever it is refined, you can then use that larger muscle fiber and you can produce more force. Now, it doesn't matter which muscle fiber type, whether it's fast or slow. If they're the same size, they're going to produce the same amount of force. So there's many ways to grow hypertrophy. The biggest outcomes that are different are that your type 2 muscle fibers, which are your fast type fibers, they shorten a lot faster than your type 1s. And so they're more powerful due to those internal metrics. So for certain people, especially operators, if you need to be quick and you need to be explosive, you're going to want to focus on the development of your type 2 fibers, which is going to be a different type of training than just overall, general bodybuilding hypertrophy. So that's going to be a different style of training. And, there's a lot of different ways to develop hypertrophy. You want to do ones that are going to be more athletically oriented.
So, can you give an example of like one or two exercises? Like I know what they are, but as far as the listeners, like how would you develop some athletic power producing hypertrophy?
Well, so yeah, exercise selection is going to be key for the main muscle groups that you want to develop. So for the population that you're working with, and everything's going to be related to, load carrying, right? So you got to travel distances with a lot of weight on you. So you have to be able to stand up to that. So you're going to be looking at all the muscles of the lower body. So both the posterior chain and anterior chain need to be fully developed. You need all of your postural muscles to be extremely strong and resilient. So those are going to be all of your core musculature, plus your erector spinae, your traps, all of those muscles that are going to keep you upright. We need them to be robust and not fatigue easily because you're going to be walking with lots of poundage for many miles. And so you need to be able to stay upright. And then where you get to where you're going, you also need to be able to get and go, right? There's things that are going to occur, unplanned events. So you can't just be big and slow. You have to be big and explosive. And so the types of lifts that are going to cater to those are going to be large muscle mass exercises that are going to challenge the whole body systemically. And the reason that we would choose those is because it's going to be the biggest return on investment. So various forms of squatting. It doesn't have to be a back squat, though that's a great choice. Could be a front squat.
They
Could
love the
be,
Zerchers here, just so
yep,
you know.
searchers. Yeah, those are good. They'll make you tough and make your arms hurt. Um, you know, deadlift, trap bar deadlift, those are all good. And then for upper body, you got your various pressing, your heavy rows. So things like seal rows, where you're laying on a bench, rowing the bar up, anything where you can be really stable and produce a lot of force, that's going to create a lot of mechanical tension, challenge the system, and give you, the most robust hypertrophy that you need. And then you can sprinkle in some accessories and isolation exercises as needed where people might have deficiencies.
Awesome. I'm going to start to talk more about the guys mainly here with Infinite Grit, are guys that are trying to assess for a specific pipeline. And during that time of their train up, they are running extensively many miles a week. They might run once or twice, or ruck once or twice a week. Um, but you're looking at high miles with low averages into 10, 15 miles a week. Um, a lot of calisthenics done up to 4 times in a week, strength training up to 3 times in a week. And depending again on the pipeline, you might have swimming once or 3 times a week. So a ton of workload. How would you go about introducing some hypertrophic stuff for maybe someone who's undersized, maybe a gentleman who's like about 145 pounds? What would you
Okay.
look at first? What would you tell that guy?
So I would look at the structure of the week, and then I would find out where the longest and most difficult cardiovascular work is being done. And I would put the hypertrophy work away from those times as much as possible. It's not going to be perfect, right? This is not an ideal world. But if you know that you have to walk with weight and you have to walk for this many miles, and it's going to be very fatiguing, I would not put a hypertrophy workout in and around that time. I would give yourself like, 24 or 48 hours in and around there to recover. And then if you're doing any heavy sprinting or running on your feet, something that's going to be high intensity or intervals, it's that pounding, on the feet that's going to be the most deleterious on hypertrophy.
Hmm.
Things that don't seem to cause as much interference with them are going to be anything where you're off your feet. So like cycling, not a big deal because you're not having that gravity pushing down. Swimming is not really that bad because you're in the water. It is a form of resistance training, but it's not as heavy on the joint pounding in those workouts. So I would look at the structure of your week and then try and give yourself the biggest gaps between the hardest workouts. So, in an ideal week, maybe you would have like a long run or ruck on Saturday, and then like high intensity workout on Tuesday. Then maybe you do some hypertrophy work on those in between days. In there like, on maybe on a Monday, or if you could get it in on like a Thursday. That way, it's far enough away that's going to have the least negative carryover when you're trying to get that particular stimulus.
Awesome. So now we kind of covered what it is, why it's good for you, and how you would go after it if you were on team, and how you would go after it um, if you're training up for a pipeline. Now I just kind of have a lot of random questions that revolve around hypertrophy training. And I think one of the most important ones is the guys who are training for a pipeline. We tend to think in hypertrophy in the lens of there's a lot of soreness coming off the ends of these types of workouts. Is it true that you have to get to a point of muscle soreness to create the stimulus for hypertrophy?
No, and this is a really good question. So they used to believe that going to failure was necessary in order to induce the best hypertrophy. But we now know that you do not have to go to failure to get robust hypertrophy. And it's actually better from a fatigue management and potentially injury standpoint to leave a few reps in the tank. Now, I'm not saying you can train easy, but what I am saying is that you can get about 2 to 3 repetitions from failure on any given exercise. And that is a robust enough stimulus to give you a good hypertrophy outcome. And for who you're working with, if they're not trying to be really sore, leaving that little bit in the tank and doing multiple difficult sets with a little bit left is going to be great. So you can use like an RPE system, or you could use a repetitions in reserve, whatever works in the setting that you're in. As long as there's that sufficient degree of effort, the only thing then that matters is the total amount of volume that you're doing. So this is where new evidence has come out. You can build the same amount of hypertrophy with 5 reps as you can with 30, as long as the volume is equated. Now, the person doing 5 to get to the same volume as 30 is going to die, but as long as the effort is the same and the volume is the same, you're going to get the same outcomes. So that's where it's changed a little bit. They used to think that you had to go to failure, but that's no longer the case. The other thing that's important to consider when soreness is an issue is to keep in mind the repeated bout effect kicks in. So when you do a novel exercise or you change exercises up, when you initially do it, you get sore the first time, but then every subsequent bout is less fatiguing and less soreness inducing. And that's because your body builds up a resilience. It takes about 10 to 14 days. So once you've agreed upon a set grouping of exercises, don't change them up as your hypertrophy inducing exercises, and then they become less strenuous in the later exercises. So commit to like an 8-week hypertrophy cycle and keep your workouts very similar so that you can drive the adaptations and then remove those variables that could cause you to get sore.
When you were talking there, the first thing that pinged into my head for guys that are on team, which what I used a lot at the 2-3, was hypertrophy clusters.
Yep.
Those 8 sets of 5 were like money.
Yep.
Yep.
And you don't take them to failure, right? You do 8 sets of 5, but you're still, they're very challenging. It's a very taxing workout, but you're not destroyed. You're not on the floor on your last couple sets, like, puking in a bucket. You leave a little bit, and then you can come back the next day and do it again. So what did Lee Haney say? You want to stimulate, not annihilate.
Yep.
So that's what you want to think of.
One quick follow-up on that.
Go ahead.
When obviously we can use the reps in reserve or the RPE scale, maybe for somebody listening to this, they're going to have a hard time distinguishing when that on their own without somebody there kind of guiding them through it. What's like a good metric or way for an individual to know that they pushed substantially hard to get the adaptations from it, but they didn't go to that point that's going to create that soreness? So a lot of guys think, if I don't go to failure, nothing's going to happen. But then if they leave reps in the reserve, they feel like they didn't get anything from that session. What would you tell that guy?
Yeah, so you want to have an anchor on either system that you use, where this is the repetition range that you want to achieve. You don't want to be less than this, because if you are less, then you're probably leaving some on the table. But you don't want to be this high to where you're dipping into your fatigue reserves. So in that, you probably want to be like a 7.5 to 9 on an RPE scale, right? That's going to be like 2 or 3 repetitions left in the tank. Because if you think of a 9, that's like hard, but a 9.5 is like, I have 1 more rep left. Like if someone tells me like I have to do it, like, someone's challenging your family, you're going to do the 9.5, and then a 10 is an RPE. So a 9 is like 2 left in the tank. And then if you do a repetitions in reserve system, you want to ask the person on the sets working up, when you get to your working weights, if I had to ask you to keep going, how many more reps could you do? And then they might say, well, I feel like I could do 4 or 5 more reps. Okay, we're not where I need to be. We're going to add a little bit of load. Then you do that set. How many do you think you could do? Probably had, 2, maybe 3 reps. Perfect. This is your load, and it can adjust across the sets. If Tyler does 8 sets of 5, it might not be the same load for all 8 sets, because the repetitions in reserve may change due to the already amount of fatigue that they're coming in with from all the other work. So that would be how you would anchor those 2 systems.
That's awesome. Some more questions for you, Chris. Is it possible for someone who's novice, so let's say a guy who's maybe been in the military for a couple of years, but not a lot of strength and conditioning background. Is it possible for him to achieve muscle hypertrophy with general calisthenics? One. Number two, sprinting, like think hill sprinting. And then the third would just be general long distance running.
Okay. So, general calisthenics done with your body weight with no other implements, if you are untrained, initially will yield some hypertrophic gains. You will get bigger because there's mechanical tension, but it has diminishing returns that rapidly kick in, especially for the muscle groups that we outlined already, like the lower body muscles that are large and powerful. Initially, when you're deconditioned or just a beginner, sure, body weight squats are going to build some hypertrophy just because it's an overload stimulus because you didn't do anything. But at a certain point, you're going to be doing multiple sets. You can do like 20, 25 reps of a body weight squat. Probably not the stimulus that you're looking for hypertrophy. You're moving more into a muscular endurance kind of outcome. So from body weight, it's great. You know, you always want to leave those in. There's reasons to build relative strength, you know, as you go, but you're going to have to start loading with weighted implements, dumbbells, barbells, whatever you got in and around your facility. Sprinting, same thing, going to build muscle initially. It challenges your type 2 fibers, especially if you can run pretty fast, but it's not the best stimulus for muscle growth. And that's because, again, it's just your body weight. You do get to high peak forces in the lower limbs, which would be a stimulus. But the problem is it's heavily neurally fatiguing and you can't get that much volume in, right? You can't just do hundreds of sprints and then recover from them. You just get too tired. So again, not going to serve as a potent stimulus for hypertrophy outside of an initially untrained person, and then it will rapidly be too fatiguing for it to serve as that purpose. And then running is basically the the opposite of building muscle. So if you have two ends of the continuum, the molecular pathways that are designed for running to keep us alive are cellular survival pathways. They directly compete with muscle building pathways, which are you're in a good environment, there's nutrients, there's rest, and there's no stress, we can grow. These two things compete with each other. So long distance running is the worst stimulus for hypertrophy. And so you can tell when you look at athletes and how they train, marathon runners don't have a lot of hypertrophy because they do so much mileage, and you wouldn't want to look like them from a performance standpoint unless you're a marathon runner. If you look at sprinters, they do a combo of powerful heavy lifting plus sprints. They're extremely muscular, and that's why that happens, because there's different volumes, different demands for different sports.
Excellent. Do you think it can be appropriate? So a lot of these guys, they need really good numbers on their cals. Think pull-ups, push-ups, etc. Do you think that it's important to invest in some loaded pull-ups, dips, push-ups, etc., to maybe get some hypertrophy there while also increasing their work capacity on those?
Yeah, for sure. It's such a good idea because if you imagine, you're never going to be more powerful than your ceiling, right? You're never going to be stronger than your ceiling, which is going to be your maximal strength. So imagine right now, you have a guy, it's 150 pounds, and he can crank out pull-ups, right? But we add weight to him, weighted vest, weight on a belt, and they're doing pull-ups, and he can add, 20, 25, 30 pounds above and start cranking out these reps. Then when he goes to test again, his maximal strength in the pull-ups or dips is going to be so much higher than his body weight. He's going to be able to easily cruise through more repetitions, hit the numbers that he needs, and not be gassed when it's over, right? You get full points, and then you're ready to go for the next test. So you might, do your dip test or push up. You might max out your pull up test. And it's not really that stressful because it's under your ceiling. You've raised the ceiling high enough by adding in that extra maximal strength work of the specific movement that doing that relative movement at your own body weight is not as stressful.
Awesome. I got some questions for you now on nutrition for hypertrophy. And I know you
Okay.
were the one of the first persons ever. I remember we were lifting in Westminster, Maryland, and we were talking about protein absorption and
Hmm.
how that works as you age. So I know
Yep.
you're kind of a little bit well versed in protein. How much protein do you think is necessary for someone to put on size, keep size, etc.?
So the current recommendations show a range from 1 times your body weight in kilograms. That's really important. 1 times your body weight in kilograms to 2 times your body weight in kilograms. That's going to be the range of values that are going to be found in the literature. When you look at the optimal dosing, there's kind of like a dose response curve. It's around 1.6 times your body weight in kilograms. That's where, like, if you can get to that, it's going to give you the most benefits. And then if you're really looking for hypertrophy, like you just want to max it out, you go up to 2. That's going to be where it really levels off. The only times that protein gram numbers would be higher is if you were ever trying to lose weight. Then you could go higher. That's not really applicable for the population that you're working with, so you don't really need to be concerned with that. But you don't want to be below 1 times your body weight in kilogram. That's not going to sufficiently aid in repair. So for maxing out hypertrophy, what we're talking about today, somewhere between 1.6 to 2 is going to give you the best benefits. And so if you don't want to like leave any stone unturned, just go to 2 times your body weight in kilograms and just get after it.
And are you okay with obviously the main source of this being animal source protein? Are you okay with like me taking in 60 to 80 grams of whey protein throughout the day to try to hit that number?
It would be best to get it from as much whole food sources as you can. A combination of plant and animal sources are fine. We now know it's all about the same. You just have to consume more plant-related protein to hit your numbers. But certainly if someone's trying to put on size and they're struggling to eat, they're very busy, you're doing a lot of trainings or there's meetings, there's a lot of stress. Getting that whey protein in to top everything off would be fine. Casein protein at night, if you need it to really hit your numbers, would be okay. But the best thing is to get everything from whole food sources, and that's because they carry with them other nutrients that you can use. So that's going to be your best bet, is to make your main diet excellent and then supplement on top with anything that you might be missing due to the active lifestyle that they're living.
Can you talk a little bit briefly about protein absorption, um, the role it plays, and then kind of like what we talked about years ago, the absorption of it as you age?
Yeah, so, you know, just basically talking, you can have protein from animal sources, different animals that you eat, and then you can also get protein from plant sources. Animal proteins, for the most part, are complete proteins, which means they contain all the necessary amino acids that you would need to sustain life. You don't need to add anything to those. So they have a complete amino acid profile. And within those, there are different rates of absorption. So certain proteins get digested and used at a higher rate than others. So things like milk, whey protein, eggs, beef, these are all high on that list. Plant protein is totally fine. It works the same way, but oftentimes the plant protein that you eat is incomplete, meaning that it doesn't have every amino acid that you need to sustain. And so you would need to eat combos of plants together to get a full amino acid profile, or you could have plant protein plus animal protein to bump up the protein that you have. Now, the other issue with plant protein is that some of them are not absorbed as readily as animal protein is. And so, in order to get the amount of protein extracted out, you actually need to consume more of those plants than you would otherwise because you're not getting as much in through the system. And so it's fine to move things around and keep your diet varied and get different sources of protein, but just know that some are absorbed better than others. And you can look up the scales. It's called a protein digestibility scale. You can look it up online and it ranks everything. And then you can also look up the amino acid profiles of various foods and see where you might be lacking. And then you can combine foods together if you're getting a lot of vegetable protein in that case. I mean, for the population that you're working with, you're probably not getting a lot of, vegetarian or vegan operators. I'm sure there are some out there, and that's their choice. They would need to really work with a nutritionist to build out their complete diet to make sure they're not missing anything. Everyone else is going to be eating a mixed diet, and you just want to make sure that the proteins that you're getting are high quality. Now, you
Awesome.
asked me about aging. Basically, as you age, everything gets worse. But when it relates to protein, as you age, you develop what's been termed anabolic resistance, which means from the same dosage of protein, you get less of a robust protein synthesis response. And all that means is that as you get older, you want to have a larger dosage of protein following a workout because you're less responsive to that dose. So, a younger individual, someone that's like 20, 30 years old in their prime, you can take, 25 to 35 grams of protein in depending on your size, and that's going to spike your maximal protein synthesis all the way up due to the presence of leucine, and you're very responsive to it. So your muscles will just absorb that as you spike those amino acids in the system. As you age, you just need a larger bolus of protein as you go, maybe 40, 50 grams after your workout, because you don't have the same response as you age. So really it's, 50, 40, 50 years, and then later as you go, you just need more protein after the workout to get the same kind of robust protein responses you would get when you're younger.
Do you think that's why like a lot of old jack dudes don't eat a lot of carbs because a lot of their calories are just so meat heavy?
Um, it could be. That could just be of where they're at and them trying to maintain their physique as they're older, so it's easier for them to regulate carbohydrate intake. But yeah, definitely getting that really big dosage of protein in right after the workout is critical for them.
Awesome. Do you know any interesting facts about muscle hypertrophy or like muscle size on a human and TBI related issues?
Hmm.
So it's something I talked to Bo about once I started working with operators, and he put it quite frankly. Uh, if I'm in a room and an RPG hits the room, there's going to be a lot of vibrations. If I'm bigger and larger, the chances of me dying are less, but the vibrations through my body will also be less. So I had an individual who ended up getting really banged up. We were in DC at a place called NICO, and they studied his brain because it was kind of foobar. And this was a large, muscle bound human being. And what they found is that his concussions could have been dramatically worse if he had less size on him, just due to the vibrations going through his body. So when I took that, I kind of took it to heart, kind of my knowledge and like the micro trauma of being on a range all day throughout years of military career. Um, so I always kind of made it a point to have hypertrophy always in, no matter where we're in the training cycle. Like even if we aren't on a hypertrophy block, I would still sprinkle some of that in there as a means to protect their brain.
Yeah. I'll give you an interesting story, and then I'll give you my totally speculative answer. This is something I would need to look up, and then we can discuss some strategies to try and prevent concussions in operators. So in the 70s and 80s, there was a super heavyweight weightlifter in Russia, and he was gigantic. These guys are like in the 300 pounds of that time, and completely juiced up. And they got into a severe car accident, and everyone in the car died except for him. The engine block ended up on top of him, and basically the doctor said, because you're so large and hypertrophied, that's the only thing that kept you alive. And so it was basically his massive size that kept him from living through that car accident, just because he was massive. So, is there something you can take away from that? Yeah, you're probably more resilient when you have more size on you. So, you know, things that can help to prevent a concussion, neck strengthening exercises. They're going to help keep your head from getting that whiplash effect. And this is done indirectly through exercise selection. So weightlifting movements, shrugging movements are all going to help to build up that neck protection that you need. But then you can also do direct neck training, and that can help build up the muscles in and around the neck. And you can do that dynamically, but also isometrically. And so keeping the head stabilized, making it stronger, and then having really that armor around the body is going to protect you in situations when there would be concussive forces pushed against you, in like the case of an explosion. And so that's where having some degree of hypertrophy would be good, as well as supporting the joints in and around those muscles. So if you have more hypertrophy and you happen to get thrown against a wall, that's going to help you more than not having that protection from added muscle size.
Awesome. One of my last questions is having to do with supplementation. Um, we have guys messaging us all the time about what type of supplements can I take, what's good for hypertrophy, and creatine gets passed around a lot.
Mhm.
So can you give me your insight on creatine, what it does? Does it dehydrate you? Does it hold water, make you gain weight, etc.?
Okay. So, creatine, what are the mechanisms behind it? Well, creatine is stored in your muscle. Everybody has it right now. Taking extra creatine within the diet in the form of supplementation will saturate your muscle with extra phosphocreatine. And the first energy system that you have is called the ATP PCR system. And as the ATP is used for energy, phosphocreatine is going to immediately resynthesize ATP. So within your workout, creatine is going to allow you to have a better performance because you're going to be able to get more repetitions in due to that immediate energy availability. Now, how much creatine you can store in your body is heavily dependent on your genetics. Some people have low resting levels of creatine, and so creatine supplementation is going to help them more than someone that naturally has high levels. That's why you see, really good and really low responders to creatine. But everyone will see some benefit. So that's going to help you from a strength standpoint, right? Getting more reps in. That's also going to help you from a hypertrophy standpoint because you can get more volume in. And it does tend to make you gain a little bit of water weight, a few pounds generally. And while that sounds like a negative, it can help cushion the joints and make them feel better. It makes your workouts a little bit better. And whenever you cycle off of it, so like if you go out into the field, it rapidly drops that water weight in about 2 weeks. So you're not going to sustain that unless you keep taking the creatine while you're out in the environment. Long-standing issues that people have brought up, kidney issues, not present with creatine. Cramping, as long as you're hydrated, doesn't seem to be an issue. Like outside of anything, it doesn't dehydrate you. And then some people have worried about compartment syndrome from taking creatine. None of those have bared out in the literature. They've had people take creatine for multiple years with no adverse health effects. And so it's probably the safest and most studied supplement. There is only one thing with creatine that might happen, and that's that you'll get a tummy ache. So as long as you can survive your stomach being upset for the first couple times you take it, that's really the only net negative from taking creatine. Outside of that, they've shown better recovery, better cognitive outcomes for certain people, and then obviously better performance. So for the people that you're working with, I think all three of those would be important. You have to be able to think clearly. You're going to be put in stressful situations. You have to also learn things when you go out into the field. You're going to go through training. So if you can be a little bit sharper, if you can recover more and your performance is better, especially in short bursts when things are critical, it's a great supplement to take and it has really no negative drawbacks.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
John, you got anything for Chris?
Absolutely. I got a couple. This is great, man. I really appreciate it. This is learning a lot. So I want to go back to the muscular endurance standpoint. Tyler touched on it, but obviously the muscular endurance for guys training up for different pipelines is very important. They got to be able to do push-ups, pull-ups, and then, move across and carry heavy equipment for hours. So let's say push-ups, a guy is trying to increase his push-ups. Would it be better to do obviously your strength work like we talked about, and then sub-maximal sets of calisthenics throughout the week, or what is that kind of, I guess, midpoint or optimized point of frequency and intensity for those calisthenic sessions?
Yeah, so for someone that is relatively new or is just beginning training and their absolute strength is lower than you want it to be, getting stronger first is going to yield better benefits to them doing more push-ups. So if you can get their bench press strength up or their shoulder press strength up, that's initially going to do more. But then you need to train for the test to make sure that you're resilient for it. So that means that you would have a main pushing workout, and then you would have a supplementary body weight calisthenic workout. And there could be times where you do specific muscular endurance training in the gym. So you're going to lift a sub-maximal weight for as many repetitions as possible. All three of those avenues are going to help you with that test. It just depends how you move them around and periodize it. So, if you know you have a test coming up, you may then train specifically for that PT test to max out the points. So then you may shift from a maximal strength development to a strength endurance development kind of flow, doing more reps with less weight. But that's all built on the backbone of being very strong.
Love it. Yeah, solid. And then last question is, so in the beginning, Tyler mentioned that typically with the guys training for selection, which is very much more of an endurance event, we'll get 2 to 4 strength sessions a week, depending on the individual. Let's say we're taking an average guy, so 170 to 190 pounds, about 5'11", decent like body mass. He has like a decent amount of lean mass on him. With those limited sessions that we have, would it be better to focus on more maximal strength? So lower rep ranges, higher weight in relation to the 1 rep max? Or would it be better to use those sessions to focus more on hypertrophic benefits from them?
So depending how far out you are from your goal, your priorities may change. So initially, when you're very far out from what you're doing, you may put more effort and energy into hypertrophy focused workouts for that initial phase. So let's say you have 4 workouts and you're going to continue those for, let's say, 12 weeks leading up to your event, just to have like an anchor point. Your first 4 weeks, you might do 2 maximal strength sessions and then 2 dedicated hypertrophy sessions. But even after your maximal strength work, your accessories may be done with a higher volume to try and get that hypertrophic stimulus in. So let's say maybe you do squats for 5 or 6 reps. You might do something like a split squat for higher repetition ranges. That's going to be a hypertrophy stimulus on top of that. Then when you move towards your, intermediate phase, you'll keep those days the same, but your maximal strength days will stay maximal strength, and you will remove that hypertrophy volume from those days to allow you to adapt from that stimulus. Then you'll retain your hypertrophy on those 2 other days a week as a more hypertrophy focused day. Then when you get to your last phase, you're getting into fatigue management because you're about to get to your most important phase. So then you may do, you know, a strength day, maybe 2 power days, and then a top off hypertrophy day, focusing on the areas that they're missing. And then you have your test event, or, if you're getting out and getting deployed or whatever it is, you change your focus as you go. And that allows you to get all the work in, but slowly change your focus over time.
Love it. Yeah, that's great, man. That's all I got for it. But Tyler, you got
Chris.
anything?
Oh yeah. Why are front squats the best lift ever?
Because the bar's sitting on your neck and it's trying to kill you.
We once did a podcast on like our favorite lifts, and I talked about how the front squat essentially rises all tides, and just how I can make a trap bar deadlift go up. I can make a push press go up. I can make everything. Do you have any like lifts that you've seen, because you work with an array of different athletes? Do you have any like freakishly transferable lifts that you've seen over time that kind of can rise all tides, like the front squat?
Yeah, probably front and back squat tend to make everything else move just because of the overall stress it's placing on your body. The front squat is great because it challenges your posture as well. You have to fight to stay upright, so it's going to work your core differently. It's going to challenge the lower body at the same time. So those are going to be big movers. Um, for other athletes, deadlifting is important, especially for operators. You're going to have to pick stuff up off the ground, potentially another person. So because that movement is already in there, various forms of deadlifting are going to be important. And then various forms of pressing. So probably what's going to be better is going to be overhead pressing, just in the situations that you're in and the movements that you're going to see in your population. The overhead press is going to be more preferable than the bench press, just due to the muscle action that you're seeing. Um, but you have to do the bench because it carries over to push-up performance, which is one of your key tests. So it's got to be in there. But if I had to put more effort into one of them, the overhead press and the variations, they're going to carry over to things you're going to see in the field more readily than, let's say, just a barbell bench press.
Awesome.
Amazing. Awesome, man. Where can people find more about you? Obviously, you have a lot of insights, and we can nerd out here forever. But
Hmm.
for guys that want to follow along and stay more in tune with what you got going on, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. So Dr. Chris Tabor on there. If you want to follow me, I post up stuff on there when it comes up. Not that anyone would read a research article for what we talked about, but I'm on ResearchGate, so you can always find me on there. And then anything related to like what I'm doing with sports and school, I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me on any of those places and follow me.
Solid. Awesome, man. Appreciate you coming on. Guys, go check him out. Thank him for joining us and sharing his insights. And then if you guys need anything on our end, as always, feel free to hit us up.